Hey, welcome to Coffee with Kirk. This is Kirk Walden, and it's great to be talking to you today about stories. Our stories are so important to our ministry, and I want to start with a story because God does things in our ministries, and I think we cannot forget these. We've got to keep our stories out there, and that's where we want to go today. I remember one time we had a prenatal clinic at our center. It still does, but this was way back when. And I remember a young lady was in for her prenatal appointment, saw the doctor and all the things, blood work, all that kind of stuff. And the doctor and nurse walked out of the patient room where she was. And for a few minutes, she was going to be getting dressed and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't see her come out for a while. And finally, we sent the nurse back in to check on her. And this young lady was in the corner of the room, balled up and crying. She was just sitting on the floor, knees up to her face, and in tears. And our nurse put her arm around her, they talked, and she was simply overwhelmed by the situation that she was in. She was thinking about adoption. She was kind of going back and forth about it. And she was so overwhelmed, she was simply paralyzed with fear about what was ahead. That's only half the story, because she got through that appointment, was able to go out the door and go on with her life at school, come back the next month for prenatal clinic, and she was a little better, but still waffling back and forth on what to do, which so many do who are thinking about adoption. We understand that. But she began to grow, and she began to grow in her faith, and she began to get stronger. She did place her child for adoption. And 2 years later, she came back to my office, and she was a different person. I didn't recognize her when she walked in the door. She was confident. She was smiling. She was doing great. She graduated from college, if I remember correctly, and just doing wonderfully well. And she comes to me and she says, Mr. Walden, she said, this is what I'm doing now. She was a liaison with the adoption agency. This person who was paralyzed with fear had become a liaison for the agency to talk with adoptive parents about what birth moms were going through. And she would share her story with them so that they would understand, hey, we're one half of the equation here, but what about this young lady and what she's going through? How can we understand her situation? And as open adoption became more popular during that time, this was such an important facet of their ministry to have this young lady, I'll call her Laura, who was doing this on a regular basis, meeting with these couples. And I think that's a story that I have remembered for 30 years now. There's a problem with this story. And that is, I don't believe it's written down anywhere. I remember it. Those who are around, we could probably talk about it and say, do you remember when the girl Laura came in? Do you remember that situation? Oh, yes, I remember that. But it's not written down. I think we need to do that more often, a lot. Many of you out there are doing this. You have a book, you have stories written down, but I want to encourage you, and for others, maybe get you started, because stories are so important to what we do. They're about our culture and who we are. I remember another time when we were our prenatal clinic again. A young lady came in. We were just starting ultrasound at this time. This was kind of at the advent of ultrasound and pregnancy centers in the mid-90s. Centers were just starting with this. We weren't the first by any stretch, but we were one of the early centers to do ultrasound, and we didn't have all the I's dotted and T's crossed, but we had worked with NIFLA, and we had gotten to a point where we were offering ultrasound to our clients as they came in. But here we were at a prenatal clinic. This was a client who had already had an ultrasound and was, we thought, ready to carry her child to term. But as we talked to her that day at prenatal clinic, she was probably 12 weeks along. She was not sure she was going to carry this child to term. And our doctor that day, our OB that day, he came out and he said, we need to do another ultrasound. And when they came out of that room, they said, you're not going to believe this. I think we saw the child's ear. And I don't know why they brought that up, but they got such a clear picture and they were elated. And this young client came out, this patient came out, and she was holding the picture of that baby and tears were streaming down her face. And she, from that point on, was absolutely, positively determined to carry that child to term. That's a story. But again, the story never got written down, and that's on me as an executive director. I never thought about this back then, about writing down our stories. And I think it's vital for many reasons. What we can do with these stories, for many reasons, we need to write these stories down and put them somewhere where we're all going to be able to see them. And they can be used in so many different ways. And I would say, hey, let's just grab a ring binder, type it up, change the names, do whatever we need to do so that a client, even if she read that story, she'd go, well, that sounds kind of like mine, but maybe it is me, maybe it's not, but it's not my name. Okay, we can do that because it's so important that people see our stories. You know, we tell stories at our fundraising dinners. We put stories in our newsletters. Let's take these stories and make sure they are in one place where we can all find them. Because, for instance, if we have a donor who's with us one day and they're going on a tour of our center, walking through, or on our mobile unit or in our maternity home, wherever it happens to be, we could pull that booklet, I'll just say book, ring binder, whatever it is, and hand it to that person and maybe flip open to a page that we predetermined and say, hey, here's one of our stories. Let them see the stories. It's a huge deal if we want to be able to find these stories whenever we need them. If we need one for a newsletter that we haven't thought about and we're sitting there and saying, golly, we really need a story for our newsletter, let's go back to our storybook. Let's go back and find that so that we can put it out there so that people will see what's going on the ground in the ministry they support. Whenever we tell a story, whether it is at a banquet or whatever time we do it, let's make sure that story goes into the book so that people can find it. Hey, and if we can get them on audio and video, we need to find a place to place those too, so that we are always telling our stories. For instance, if we make a major ask, we need to make sure and take a couple of those stories with us so that they can see what's going on in their ministry that they support. Because major gifts are often but we often acquire major gifts because of people seeing the stories. It's not the statistics that move somebody to a major gift. It's often the stories. So we need to have these stories. We can put them anywhere. Here's another reason we want to have our stories. For onboarding purposes. Every employee, as they onboard, even a volunteer staff member, very important here, we want them to see the stories. Because when they see the stories, they begin to understand our culture, who we are, what we value. Because if our story is about someone who broke a chain of addiction or broke a chain of dependency on government funding or whatever it happens to be, that tells something to our new employee or our new volunteer staff member about what we value. And if it's a story about someone who came in thinking they were going to end their pregnancy, or someone who took the abortion pill and it was reversed through our ministry or through a referral that we made, that tells our story so that those who come in and join our team understand our culture. And I would also encourage all of us to look at our stories and say, let's try to find those stories where we know that it never would have happened unless God had intervened in a miraculous way. We're going to see those stories. We're going to see God where we haven't seen Him before. And that's why our stories are so important as well. I love stories. I mean, I tell stories all day long when I'm at events. One of the things I do is tell stories. That's what gathers people in. And I tell people at events where I'm at, people aren't going to remember me that much. But they're going, after I've been gone and 2 years after I've spoken at an event, I'd love to tell you, everybody's going to remember everything I said. And I've had some good things said about what I say and all of that. But honestly, let's be real. They remember They remember best the story of that client who came in. I was at a Midwest university one time, and a woman who, she had model good looks, African American. Well, she was actually African, not African American, but African. Had just model good looks, looked like she could be on television. In fact, that's what she was studying to do, was to be a television, TV anchor or reporter. She was majoring in communications at this Midwestern university and had a presence on the stage that you just say, man, if she was our spokesperson, we're going to be fine. And she told the story of coming to America from Africa on a scholarship and being violated just weeks after she came on campus. And she found out she was pregnant not long after. And she realized that she had a big decision to make. She came to the center. And of course, this wouldn't be a story I was telling unless it was a story of a center. And at that center, she found hope. And at that center, she found the courage to give life to her child and place her child in an adoptive home. And I'm telling you, that audience and the speaker that night will never forget her story. We can't ever forget our stories. We've got to be writing them down. We've got to be sharing them with our donors. We've got to put them in a place where we can find them anytime. I mean, it may be a special spot in the break room where we place our storybook. I wouldn't put it out on a coffee table in the lobby or anything like that, but it's a place where only we can find it. And if anybody needs those stories, we can go to that book anytime and be encouraged as to what God has done through this ministry over the years. If you've already started a book, this is an encouragement to keep going. But if you've never done this, don't worry about it. Why don't we just gather a few staff members around and begin to think about the stories that we've had? What about that person, she told her story at last year's banquet? Is that something that goes into our storybook? What about 5 years ago? Do you remember so-and-so who came in here? Or the young lady who just came back 2 weeks ago to tell us what we meant to her? It's interesting. I was sitting at lunch with a director of a center and her husband and a couple other people just the day before I recorded this. And she had a text that she read me aloud. And it was a beautiful text. I wish I could remember every word in it. But it was a beautiful text about how you changed my life. That's a story. It doesn't have to be long. This was a text that is probably, if you read it all, it was 2 paragraphs. That's enough. That's enough. Because telling our stories, they don't have to be novels. They can be short, but they're going to be powerful because we will remember what God has done in this ministry. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't yet, let's get started. Just grab a ring binder, if nothing else. You don't have to, it may develop into something big. It may be a giant volume like my family Bible that's probably, I don't know, it seems like it's 10,000 pages. It's 6 inches thick. I don't even know all the stuff that's in it. But it may become something huge. But it can start with 1 page and 1 story. And then the next one comes. Another thing that happens when we begin telling our stories, I think we are a little more proactive in looking to see God at work. When we know that a story may develop out of this person who comes in the door that we're going to remember for a long time. So always be looking for those stories and start wherever you are. And I would encourage, once you have this book or whatever it happens to be together, I would encourage every staff member needs to read it, even not just those onboarding, but those who have been there for a while. Let's have everybody read our stories. Let's build a culture around our stories so that everybody in the office knows the story of when Ellen came in 12 years ago and what happened to her and how God moved in her life and how God used someone in our ministry to touch Ellen's life. Let's all know that story. We're not going to have any inside, oh, she knows it and she knows it and he knows it, but nobody. No, we need everybody to know these stories. Again, we'll keep it in a place where not everybody can get access to it. We'll share them with donors on an as-needed basis at certain times. We'll place those stories maybe in our newsletters as well. But just getting started, I think, makes all the difference in the world. Just start. Get together with a few people and talk about the stories that you know. As more come to mind, include them. And I would say this, every quarter, go back to that book and ask if we've been able to add a new story. And if not, that's okay. Sometimes it takes a while. But just a reminder, go back and see every quarter, have we added a story to that? Have a storyteller in the office. It can be your administrative person. It could be your executive director. It could be your head of client services. It could be anybody in the office. This is not a job for the director of client services. It's kind of one of those things where you find that person who's your archivist and say, you know what? She is great at putting these stories together. Doesn't have to have a job where she's even communicating with clients, but she's out there finding the stories as people go through the ministry and as we see things take place. And I think it's a great opportunity. Again, as I mentioned earlier, once we start committing to writing down the stories, it's like a podcast we did before, which is what you measure improves. If we begin measuring our stories, we're going to be seeking more stories. And as we seek more stories, we're going to be looking for more stories out there in terms of let's be proactive about seeing what's going on with her, because there may be a story there that tells what this ministry is all about. And in the end, it's maybe like stones of remembrance from the Old Testament, but it's an opportunity for us to set our culture as to who we are and what matters to us the most. If you're not doing it now, why not start? If you're already doing it, let this be an encouragement to you. Keep going. Keep telling the stories. Keep finding the stories. We use them, again, for donors as they may be making a tour through our center. We may pull the stories and use them in our e-blasts and newsletters and things like that. We may even find a story that we almost overlooked, and we've got an event coming up, and this person can tell their story. I was talking to a center the other day, and they're getting ready for their event. And as they get ready for their event, they were talking about the story that was told last year. And they said, and this guy is a father's story, and this guy just keeps on trucking. It just keeps getting better. And I said, well, you may take that story and bring him back again at your event and have him give an update of what's going on. Sometimes these stories can be updated. We never know what might happen next. I think about the young lady who told her story at a banquet, and I've shared this on the pod before, of being the first client at a center at their 30th anniversary. And she gave birth to this boy. And as she was telling her story, that little boy from 30 years ago was now a Marine, and he came up in his dress blues and told his story of what God has done in his life and thanked his mother and thanked all of those in the audience. You never know when we might have a part 2, a sequel to a story that we've already got. Keep telling the stories. So I would say this, if you're doing it, keep doing it. Grow this. If you're not yet, if you can't find that binder, that whatever it is that holds your stories, get a blank sheet of paper, well, computer screen these days, sit around together and say, what's one story that we want to tell? Because once we have one, we'll start searching for a second, which will lead to a third. And before we know it, we could have, and I get to use a long word here, a plethora of stories that we can share with each other, with our new people coming in, so that they understand who we are and what we're all about, what we value, and how we see God at work. And that'll encourage them on day one. And we can share them with those as we put forth a new initiative, those who can make leadership gifts and say, here's a story of what God does through this ministry that you will be funding going forward. We can do all of those things. And I'll close with this. As more stories come to mind, just include them. Just start. And you know why we start if we're not already started? Because your story needs to be told, and it needs to be remembered. So thanks for today. Thanks for joining me. Hey, sit around the table, talk about stories, and let's tell our stories to those who need to hear them most. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me for coffee. We'll talk to you again next month.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast. Subscribe and check out the show notes for more information.